This video I'm going to go over simplifying radicals. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify the square root of 48, cubed root of 32, fourth root of 405. The reason why this is important is, for example, this first one, square root of 48. You could type that in your calculator, square root of 48, and you're going to end up with a decimal, 6.928, blah, 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 blah. We don't want that, especially on the ACT. Your answers, they're not going to be in decimal form there. They're going to be tricks there to try and make you slip up. So what we're going to do is we're going to simplify this as much as possible and break it down as much as possible so we don't have to deal with decimals. The best way to do all this is we're going to work with our table of powers. So since on this first one I'm dealing with the square root of 48. So what I'm looking for, since it's the square root, I'm going to be working in the square column. Now these are all numbers that we can't take the square root of. We can take the square root of 100, 81, 64, 49, so on and so forth. Obviously, we don't see 48 in there. So the key piece here, and this is very, very important, it's how we work all of these problems, is we want to find the largest number here that can perfectly divide into 48. So I'm looking for the biggest number in this list that can divide into 48. So typically how I go through that is I start with what's my biggest number that's smaller than 48, because there's no reason to use 49, 64, 80. Those are all bigger. They're not going to work. So for example, I would start with 36. And what I would do if I want to be real basic here, I would take 48 divided by 36. That doesn't work. We get another decimal. That's not what we want. So then I would move down to the next one. I would take 48 divided by 25. Again, another decimal. That's not going to work. So then I do 48 divided by 16, and I get 3. So this is important. So I found that 16 and 3 will go into 48. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this square root. I'm going to rewrite it using the number I found in the table and then the number I left over. Here's how it's going to look. Notice how the power on my root is going to stay the same. So there's a square root up here. It's still going to be a square root down there. So I found that 16 worked, and I got an answer of 3. Now the reason this works is if I take 16 times 3, that's the same thing as 48. So what I can do is I want to break down each of these individually. So I have the square root of 16, and the square root of 16 is 4, and we also know that because it's in my table. Square root of 16 is 4. And then over here I have the square root of 3. I do not know the square root of 3. It's not in my table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that inside my root. So if I want to break down the square root of 48, that's going to break down to the 4 times the square root of 3. So a quick review on how that worked is I looked for the largest number in the x squared column. So I dealt with x squared because it's the square root. The largest number that divides into 48. I found that number was 16, so I wrote 16 in my other number that gave me 48. One of them you will be able to take the root of, the other one you will not. So that's why I was able to take the root of this and not that. You'll see that again in more examples. So another example is we have the third root of 32. So I'm going to do the same thing, same process, except this time, since this is the third root, I'm going to work with the x to the third column. So I want to find a number in this column that goes into 32. So if you're practicing at home, you might want to pause right now, figure that out. You can do that. And when you get through it, what you're going to find is the number in this column that divides into 32 is actually going to be 8. So we have the third root of 8, and my other number that you get is 4. So what I can do here is one of these I'll be able to take the root of, the other one I will not. So the third root of 8, so I'm asking myself what to the third power is 8? Well, what to the third power gets me 8 is 2. So I get a 2 here, and the third root of 4, you'll notice 4 is not in there, so we're going to leave that alone. So I get 2 cubed root of 4. Last one, I'm going to go through a very similar process. The only difference is this is the fourth root of 405. So what's going to happen is I don't care about the x squared column, don't care about the x cubed. I'm in the x to the fourth column. So I want to find the largest number in this list that divides into 405. So I'd start with 256, see if that divides to 405. If that doesn't work, then I go to 81, then I go to 16, so on and so forth. So I want to find the largest number in this list that divides into 405. So it divides in evenly, so we get no decimal. What you're going to find is 81 actually divides into 405. So notice, again, I'm keeping the root. This was the fourth root, so I have the fourth root down here. So I'm going to have the fourth root of 81. And the number, 81 times a number gets me 405. That number is 5. Again, notice how my roots, the power on the roots, is the same from the beginning. So all that's left to do is figure out what is the fourth root of 81. Well, next to the fourth column, 81, I get 3. And then try and figure out the fourth root of 5. X to the fourth, there is no 5 there, so I leave it alone, leave it inside the root. So to simplify the fourth root of 405, you get 3, fourth root of 5. And that is simplifying radicals.